That's good. So, okay, we got screenings. Let's talk about enrollment.
2 active subjects.
Enrollment/activity. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What are the possible status of subjects?
That are enrolled in this
Or anything. Screened, right?
Yeah, it's
They're
screened.
screening.
Mm-hmm.
So subjects can be screened. And from there, there's 2 things that can happen. They could be
The
screen failed. Okay.
and they had, I think there was 4 screen failed or something.
Right. So when you screen a subject, they can either be screen failed or they can qualify for the study and be randomized. Okay? Or sometimes it's called enrolled. But sometimes enrolled refers to screened. It's confusing. So randomized is more of the term. That's when you know the subject is in the study
Mm-hmm.
and they've been randomized to either the study drug or the placebo or the comparator drug, right? Or if it's open label study, they're not randomized, but that would be considered enrolled.
What's open label?
Like a phase 4, like
phase
if it's
4.
observational, right?
Okay.
There's still a screening and they don't call it a randomization. They would call it like a baseline sometimes, in those cases, right? So don't let those things confuse you.
Okay.
So that's the possible status: screen fail, randomized. What happened after randomized? They can
Going to the study.
right. Well, they're in the study at randomized. They can be lost to follow up.
Okay.
That's what you saw, right?
That's what I saw. Yeah.
Lost to follow up. They can be early term,
Early termination.
or they can complete.
Mm-hmm.
It's only those 3 options. Once they're randomized, so that will be 3, 4, and 5. That's the only, no matter what study, this is the only possibility of patient when it comes to enrollment or activity.
Mm.
Is this, okay? So these numbers can change during the study. Like if you go at your first visit and the site screened 2 subjects, at your next visit those 2 can either be 2 screen fail, 2 randomized, 1 screen fail, 1 randomized, or lost the follow-up already, depending on when you go, right? So those numbers change all the time.
Oh, okay.
That's why they include that in the report, right? But the screening number will never change unless they screen more. Like if it's 2 screened, at your next visit, they could be, their status will change, right? To either screen fail, randomized, or maybe even beyond randomized. Lost the follow-up, early term, completed. Do you know the difference between these?
Lost the follow-up.
Lost the follow-up, early term, and complete?
Yeah, lost the follow-up. They couldn't reach the subject. They tried maybe
Yeah.
making calls.
Yeah.
But in some cases, they might physically go to the address
Yes.
where the person lives.
Yes.
And every time, maybe the patient develops some issues with the medication, or issues with medication, or the PI is still the same time. Like PI decides to pull the
AEs or
patient.
SAEs, right?
Yeah, that might
Or, so the PI can decide,
yeah
the sponsor can decide, or the patient themselves can decide, right?
Mhm.
And then the difference between an early term, the difference between a patient that decides to stop the study, because they're deciding that here as well, the patient's deciding that and lost the follow-up as well.
Yeah, they're deciding also.
Yeah, but they're ignoring the site,
Mm-hmm.
right? In early term, they're coming in for their early term visit, okay, which is all the safety assessments that they do again. They also return the IP, and they're referred to their primary care or their specialist.
Okay.
Right. Like they're given a copy of their most recent ECG, lab result, to take to their doctor. If the PI is not their main doctor.
Okay.
Right. If it is, they're still referred back to the PI's care, no longer in research.
Okay.
Okay, so early term, the patient can also just decide that they want to quit. And they're allowed to do loss to follow-up also. Like the patients, if they don't feel like it, they don't have to communicate with the site anymore. But the sites should encourage the subjects to come in for the early term visit for the safety ramifications of that, and also to collect the IP. Because you don't want IP out there. Right? Especially if it's like a controlled substance. But even if it's not, you don't want the IP out there. The sponsor wants that back, which is what your colleague's actually going to be doing when they're going to do drug. And that happens to be a device. But it's the same thing. It's an expired device, which we'll get into that too, the IP. But that's the difference here between loss to follow-up and early term. And then what about completion?
The subjects saw the study to the end. Took all the IPs, came for all the visits. And,
Yep. Can a subject complete and have AEs still?
if they have AEs, yeah, they can complete and have AEs. But if it's SAEs, no. Well,
They
I
might
don't
be
know.
able
They
to.
might be able to complete.
Right. They might be allowed to complete. For example, if someone was hospitalized and they didn't miss the dose of the IP, either because the protocol allows a certain amount of non-compliance, right? Or it's a device or an infusion.
Would that be subject safety if there's an SAE?
Yeah. So if there's just because there's a SAE doesn't mean the subject needs to discontinue from the study. They can still stay on.
And if the drug of study is the reason they are having the SAE?
That's different. So that's where the PI's best judgment needs to come in. And remember, the PI's main responsibility is to take care of the subjects, the welfare of the subjects. So if the PI thinks the SAE is due to the study drug, and it's no longer providing, it's providing unnecessary harm to the subject, they can be taken out.
Okay.
But you see this in oncology all the time. There's SAEs all the time and the patients continue. Because the PI determines that it's the benefits of being in the study outweigh the SAEs. You see a lot of that in oncology.
Hospitalized but no deaths?
Could be hospitalized. Like something, it depends on the protocol. If the protocol, like especially with IP that is in pill form, if the protocol is very strict on the compliance, if a patient's hospitalized and misses a few doses and the protocol states that's too many doses to miss, they have to be withdrawn, right?
Okay.
No matter if the PI wants to keep them in or not. But if they don't, or if it's something like an infusion, or if it's something like a medical device, sometimes they can continue, but again, it's the PI's clinical judgment, right? And if the PI is unsure, they could talk to the medical monitor as well to determine the best course of action. Usually the medical monitor is, as long as there's no deviation, the medical monitor will defer to the PI. But if the PI wants to err on the side of caution, they usually will withdraw a subject if they think it's even possibly related.
Okay.
And if the risks outweigh the benefits of continuing in the study. And now some studies, this is where it gets even more complicated, some studies actually allow the PI, if there is an SAE, or if they're noticing untoward events like AEs of some sort, they allow the PI to switch the medication. So instead of the IP, they can now get standard treatment.
Okay.
Protocols are different. They can wildly vary from very restrictive to very open to PI's determinations. Right? So it always comes back to the protocol. Some studies allow that. Some studies, the sponsors will actually do it. Those are called adaptive trials. for example, if they originally designed the study to give a certain dose and they're seeing that this dose is too high or too low, the sponsor can change that midway through the study or whenever they want and change it to where it's improving patient safety and outcomes.
Okay.
Right, so it's, you have to know the protocol, but so this completion visit, what's the difference between this and the early termination visit?
The early termination, the patient doesn't follow through to the end because of obvious reasons.
Right.
But for the completion visit, the patient follows through to the end.
Yeah, end of treatment.
Yeah, goes through.
Sometimes it's called end of treatment as well.
Okay.
But the assessments in both of these visits are the same. So let's say this is visit 52 when it's the completion visit. If the patient does every single visit as they should until the end, this is visit 52, or it could be any number, right? Now let's say early term, let's say the patient completes visit 4 and then they decide, or the PI decides they're gonna early term them. They now jump all the way to this visit. That's the same exact visit. No difference really. Except, did they actually complete it or is it an early term? But it's the same thing, same assessments. Everything's the same. Okay? Except in this case, usually you have like a AE or SAE to worry about.
And then they
And
also
in this
have.
one you may or may not.
Both sides may have IPs to return.
Yeah, both would. Yeah. And both may have AEs or SAEs to follow up on, too. Depends. Depends on the patient at that point. So that's like the enrollment and activity in a nutshell. These are the only possibilities. That's it. Right? That's it. There's no other possibility except these that I can think of.
Okay, so that's why the numbers keep fluctuating from 4 to 6, 6 to 7.
Yeah. Because it changes. And how do you confirm these numbers? Like, how do you know if what the site is putting in the... How do you know what you're going to put in your report for enrollment numbers is accurate?
You go by...
Couple of ways. All of these. So obviously the EDC will tell you quickly.
Oh, okay.
But maybe not. What if the site's not enrolling or not entering the data?
Okay.
Right? So it's not the only way. There's also a screening and enrollment log in the reg binder.
In the reg binder, yeah.
Alright. There's also IWRS that you as a CRA can log into and see for yourself how many subjects they screened and randomized. Because the site can't screen someone without doing the IWRS. It won't. The system won't give them a number to do it. Right? Now sometimes you have sites that screen someone and don't register it in the IWRS and then it just screws everything up. That's a deviation too. Right? So IWRS.
So IVRS.
IV or IW.
Okay.
Usually it's the same thing. It's just one is with the web and one is with voice over telephone.
Oh, okay.
That's all it means. EDC, screening enrollment log, IWRS, IVRS, and the actual source document itself, right? Like you should, if the screening log shows 11 screens and you're only counting 10 source charts, then you're either missing one source chart or they put incorrectly on the log one extra patient for some reason. So you have to figure it out. And this is your job as a CRA, you gotta figure out and confirm all these things. And this is just the enrollment part. We're not even in any of the data part. This is just enrollment. This is supposed to be the easiest part of the monitoring visit. You're just confirming really quick. And it's a lot, but those numbers change in the logs, because the site's actually screening and randomizing in between your monitoring visits. So the site may have one subject at your first monitoring visit, then you leave and come back 6 weeks later. Now maybe they're still at one, maybe that one screen failed, or maybe that one randomized, and maybe that one randomized and early termed already, or maybe that one randomized and is still active. Alright, that's another one, is active.
Active, yeah, so active, yeah.
So I guess that's another possibility. 6, right? And those numbers change every visit based on the site's activity, right? And if the site is not screening like they said they would, the sponsor's not happy with them. And sometimes you're tasked, the CRA is tasked with finding out why, trying to encourage the site, trying to speak with the PI about why they're not screening. Or maybe the site is having an abnormally large amount of screen failures, right? That's another thing you've got to talk to the PI about. Why are you having screen failures? Are you screen failing them legitimately, or do you just not understand the protocol and you think they should be a screen failure when they're not? These are the things that you guys get paid the big bucks to do. Big bucks. All this stuff, and this is just screening, just activity enrollment. There's tons of stuff like this in every section of that report. Does it make it more clear though? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's literally there's no other possibility than this for screening. And you could throw in also if you break down the screening visit, you can get into things like informed consent, inclusion, exclusion criteria. Same thing with randomization, right? IE criteria primarily. In my opinion, it's the CRA's most important job is to make sure the site is randomizing patients that actually belong in the study. You don't want to accidentally randomize a patient who does not belong in the study, whether it's for safety or efficacy reasons. For example, ConMeds. This is a big one.
Yeah.
If a coordinator or a PI overlooks a prohibited med that has a possible known adverse reaction with the IP, that's really bad. And maybe the PI or the coordinators are just really busy and overlooked it. But then if you overlook it too as the CRA, that's kind of your most important job, if anything, is to do that, right? Like that's really it. There's nothing more important in my opinion than that for the CRA. Of course, it's the PIs and the sites.
So as a CRA, if any subject has a concomitant, you have to know what the mates are and the component if it's going to react with the IP.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, no. You'll in the protocol. It's going to show you a list of prohibited medications.
Oh, okay, yeah. I think I saw that with Chris.
Yeah, but then you as a CRA, if you don't know so if you look at the patient's ConMed log, whether it's in their source, in the ConMed log, or in the EDC itself, it should be in all three of those places. But if it's only in one or two of those places, it's missing in the third, right? Which is typically what happens. So with ConMeds, you have, obviously you have the patient source, and in that it's in two places. It's in the subject ConMed log, and it's also in the progress notes, medical history, right? So progress notes or medical history. Now it should also be in the EDC, and you should see the same thing on all three of these. So if you read somewhere in a progress note that subject is taking Ativan, but then you don't see Ativan in the ConMed log or in the EDC, that is a action item, right? You're going to tell the site in your report or in your follow-up letter.
So updates.
In reading CRA observed in progress note dated whatever it is, subject's taking Ativan. However, this is not in the ConMed log or the EDC. You can query it and you can issue action item. Very common. This happens a lot. A lot. Especially in cancer. Because they're taking so many meds that you're just reading through all the progress notes and you see all these medications. And then you look in the ConMed log and the EDC and you only find like half of them. Or vice versa. You look in the EDC and you see more than you see in here. And you say, well, where are you getting this information from? It's not written down. And the site can tell you, oh, the patient reported this that they're taking. But then the site still needs to document that and have it written down. Right? So a lot of those inconsistencies is what you're tasked to do, to resolve. Now it goes even further. So let's say you found in the progress note Ativan, okay? And it's not in the ConMed log and it's not in the EDC. Alright? So sometimes in the EDC, sometimes the EDC systems are friendly when the site puts in a med that is prohibited. The EDC will trigger, hey, this is not allowed, but please confirm if correct. Usually that's not what happens. Usually no system will trigger anything. The CRA has to trigger it. So if you read, let's say Ativan's excluded med for this protocol, okay? And you read in a progress note, but not in the EDC and not in the ConMed log, that subject's currently taking Ativan. Alright? That is now a deviation.
It's a deviation because subjects shouldn't have been randomized.
That's right. Unless they're misinterpreting the progress note. Maybe the progress note said patient is currently taking Ativan, but that was 2 weeks ago. And at some point they stopped, which would allow them to be in the study, but that's not documented. So either way, you got to follow up on that, and so does the site. This happens so many times. Little things like this too. And it could be anything. This is just ConMeds. Same thing with medical history. Same exact thing. Alright? Maybe a medical history is an exclusion. And maybe, same thing. Medical history is going to be in the source and in the EDC. Okay? And maybe you see it in one place but not in the other. Or maybe you see it in both but it's exclusionary. Well, then that patient should not be randomized. They should be screen fill. Right? And if they did randomize them anyways, that's now a deviation. And you need to get a medical waiver from the sponsor. Protocol waiver. Sometimes they'll grant it.
To say why the subject was randomized anyways?
Subject was randomized inadvertently. Sponsors sometimes can grant medical waivers. Like, we understand, we looked at this, safety aspects of this, and we determine it's still safe for the subject to continue. Most of the time they don't. Either way, even if they grant the waiver, it's still a deviation.
Yeah, because
it's still a deviation.
One would think that the sponsor is doing that for their own gain.
Could be. Or it could legitimately be a safety issue with the... Either case, FDA does not like to, like when the FDA is auditing a study, they don't want to see deviations. Because even if the waiver is granted, it's still going to be a deviation. Right? And so the more deviations a site has, the more issues the FDA can find with that site, and cumulatively, the more issues they can find with that study. If it's a sloppy sponsor and a sloppy CRO, and there's just deviations at every single visit, and they're giving a waiver for everything, well, if the FDA ever looks at those results, which they do when it's a phase 3 study and it goes to get approval, they're not going to approve it. Or they're going to tell them to go do the study over.
There's a lot of money thrown away.
Yeah. And this is where you guys come in, because you're supposed to know all this. So that's why CRAs get paid big bucks. because they need someone who knows what they're doing. I mean, this is just all we've talked about is enrollment in ConMeds and med history. A lot more than that, and deviations, and everything kind of spills into everything else. IP accountability, right? What if a subject, because most studies, if they're a pill, there's an issue with compliance, right? If it's a device or if it's an infusion, there's not really an issue with compliance because it's not up to the patient to take the IP. It's the site either gives an infusion or it's a medical device which is constantly working. So you don't need to worry about compliance. But with a pill, you do. And most protocols have a certain percentage of over-compliance or under-compliance that they will allow. And sometimes it's just a matter of one pill. If you go over or under on a visit, the sponsor in the protocol, it might state that patient should not be in the study. But if the coordinator is busy and not calculating properly, they could allow them to continue, and technically it's a deviation. And the good CRA will catch that. Nobody else gonna catch it.
Okay, studies that they don't allow more than one pill to go over or below should be controlled substances or?
Usually, yes.
Usually.
Yeah, and it's usually never as strict as one, but for controlled substances it is. But like in a non-controlled substance oral IP study, it's usually like 10% over compliance, 10% under, or 20 and 20. It also depends how long the visits are between each other. The longer they are, the more non-compliant they're allowed to be, but it's all in the protocol. And if it's not in the protocol, it's not a well-designed protocol. Or it just doesn't matter, I guess, if the patient doesn't take any. The protocol has to have some kind of guidelines for these kind of things. And it's your job to discover that as the CRA. Of course, it's the PI's job. That's their main responsibility. And it's their job to educate the patients on the importance of being compliant and to document that in their notes. But it's your job to make sure they're doing that. And it's your job to make sure they're aware. Sometimes they make deviations the site and they're not aware it's a deviation. And that's for you to find out. Right? And sometimes you have to double check, is this really a deviation? I have to look at the protocol again and see. And if it turns out it is, you have to bring it up. Or at least put it in your report if you're not sure, and have the sponsor follow up with you or your lead CRA follow up with you. But at least if it's in the report and you're bringing up these things, they know, your lead or the sponsor knows that you're vigilant about it and not just letting it slide, right? And you know what happens, a lot of CRAs, because there's lazy CRAs and then there's like really good ones and then there's ones that are trying to prove themselves so they work extra hard, and then there's other ones that don't care, they're ready to retire, and they're, there's different, just like everywhere, right? If a really good CRA, like a hypervigilant one, finds a deviation at their site, and that's the first time the sponsor's seen it, then they go back to check all the other sites, and if those are all deviations there that the CRA's missed, those CRAs get in trouble. Like, hey, the CRA found it. She only had one visit. She has a low enrolling site. You have a high enrolling site, and this happened in subject 2, 3, and 5, and you didn't catch it. So you need to be retrained on the protocol yourself. That's not good. So just because they don't discover your mistake right away
doesn't mean they won't catch it sometime.
Yeah. Because all it takes is like a really good monitor. They're just doing their job. They're not trying to get you in trouble. They're just doing their report. And now the sponsor's like, wait a minute, this is a mistake that we think could happen a lot. We didn't consider this. Let's go see all the other reports. Did we miss this? And if they find it, it's not a good look for you as a CRA. It's not a good look for them either. if numerous CRAs are missing the same thing. But if numerous are catching it and you're like one of the few that are not, now you're an outlier. You're an outlier, and the negative kind of outlier. So this is another issue, like detail, attention to detail. You have to know the protocol. And here, like during your internship, we don't have enough time to teach you specific protocols, and they're all different anyways.
Mm-hmm.
We teach you concept. But when you go in the work, out in the field, you're going to have very specific protocols. So you're going to have to not only apply these concepts, but apply these concepts to your specific situation. And that's where it's tough to fake it. You have to know this stuff really well. And a really good way to learn all this concepts is coordinator, like Monica and Kobe. You know, 1 or 2 years of a coordinator, you can be a CRA, no problem. Or an in-house CRA. Or maybe you can, like if you understand all this stuff, you can be a CRA too. But it's a lot to integrate the concepts with the details of the particular protocol. And then there's still there's always going to be some interpretation. But if you're not sure, you need to ask the sponsor or your lead. At least you're bringing it up, as opposed to not even being aware of it in the first place. Which one is acceptable and actually part of the business, and the other one is a sign that either you're lazy or you don't know what you're doing. Neither one is good. Good to have, right? Anything else from that report? That's a lot, right? It's good though. You're confident. You confident about CRA stuff? What about like a junior CRA or in-house CRA first?
Yeah, I think I want to start from basics. I don't want to just jump all the way.
And what did I tell you Monday when you came, or when I saw you earlier in the week?
You said to start doing the in-house.
That's right.
Do the in-house.
I said by Thursday or Friday we'll see. It's very rare that a student will like be ready to be a CRA. Nurses can, like RNs, because they understand these things, like ConMeds, medical history, and they understand the ramifications of.
I know all of those.
Yeah, that's right, because you have that background.
Yeah.
So then I think you can. I mean, and you have that central nervous system background too. And there's a lot of CNS studies right now, so you might have a chance to do the CRA right away.
Okay.
I still think in-house or coordinator is better initially, and then CRA. But you're right, with your background, actually you do have medical background and the CNS, which is you can compound those two together with the concepts you apply here.
The continuous diary. Okay. The question 28. There was the patient 210.
Okay.
ZLO. Reported having continuous diarrhea, but I didn't say it in the binder, and then I don't think it was also reported to the IRB. Is that a deviation?
Where'd you get that from? Where? Follow-up letter?
Yes. No. It was. Did I say it in the follow-up letter? I saw it in the binder itself. It was
the source.
The source, yeah.
And the coordinator note, or somebody wrote.
Somebody wrote that it wasn't properly documented, but then I went through to the binder and I didn't see if it was filed to the IRB. I didn't see it anywhere, so I don't know.
So it needs to be filed to the IRB if it's a SAE.
SAE.
Yeah.
Okay, not AE.
To me, that sounds like it's just an AE.
Okay. Yeah, it was an AE.
The thing I don't like about it is continuous.
Yeah, they say continuous.
Which you have to remember the condition too. Like this is constipation, and this was an irritable bowel syndrome study. So diarrhea could be considered part of medical history. So I could see why
it was the medical history.
Yeah, okay. So I can see why it's not an SAE, but it could be an AE. Not could. It is an AE, right? even if it's part of medical history, if it's an exacerbation of a medical history, like if it's more diarrhea than usual for the subject, if it's an increase in diarrhea in the frequency or the amount, it's a AE also, even if it's part of medical history.
I think the patient reported that she started having it when she started the IP. It became.
You see?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it could be it could be an AE, maybe not an SAE, right? But definitely an AE. And so it doesn't need to be reported to IRB unless it's a SAE.
Okay.
Yeah. That was a good one though. No one brought that up yet so far. Yeah, you will do well on the medical stuff.
The clarifications for the data clarification and queries being resolved, there's a specific time frame?
Yes and no. So most sites have SOP, and the sponsor asks these questions during the site selection. How long does it take to answer a query? How long does it take to enter data? And the sites always put quickly because they want to get the study. But then when the study actually is going on, it takes forever for the site to enter data, forever to get a query answered. And what you don't want to see as a CRA is a long list of continuing action items. So like, let's say you go to your IMV1 and you give them some action items, right? Queries, different things, data clarification. And then at your next visit, those are still not done, and now you found more because it's more visits now, right? So it's just gonna pile up. And as a CRA, you need to work with the site on getting these things resolved, or you can recommend to the sponsor, hey, they're not getting any of the action items done. We may need to put a screening hold on them. I recommend a screening hold.
Or you want to retrain the site?
You can retrain the site on that. You don't need to ask anyone for permission for that either.
Okay.
You can retrain the site on answering queries. You can train the site on anything. But if it still doesn't resolve it, right, then you have to escalate it to your lead. And then they will determine what to do. Now in some cases you have doctors that the sponsors love. They're called key opinion leaders. And no matter what they do and who complains as far as CRAs, they're allowed to just continue. So it's like that poses a lot of headaches for the CRAs, for those key opinion leaders. In those cases, your best strategy is to develop a good rapport with the coordinator, you and the coordinator, and encourage them to prioritize your stuff, which may or may not be easy because personalities could be different.
Yeah, personalities are different. Okay, what do you do when you find a critical value alert on the subject lab result? Critical
alert value? So on a lab result, you'll get the standard triggers like high and low, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes you'll get like panic values. Like it's so abnormal that it's panic, and the lab will call the site, or they'll email. It happened a couple weeks ago here. They'll email the PI, hey, what is your interpretation? This is
high.
But not only high, this is high panic or high telephone. Sometimes it's different things like HP, HT, or low T, low P, like low panic, low telephone, or high panic, high telephone. So then they'll reach out to the PI and ask for their interpretation. They're not just going to wait for the lab results to get signed and then filed. Because remember, those lab results, when the PI signs it and files it in the source, nobody looks at that until the CRA comes to review.
So isn't the PI supposed to check the result of the lab?
Yeah. But so here's the thing. So with those lab results, right, like normally, even if they're a little bit high or low, but they're not panic, they're telephone, the PI still needs to put NCS or CS. and then file it in the source. And then you, as the CRA, you go in at your next visit and you make sure it's there. You make sure they put CS and NCS for everything where needed. You make sure if it's CS, what was the action taken? Is this a AE? Is this a SAE? You know, you follow up on those things. But if it's at a value that's so out of range that the lab or the sponsor wants to get immediate notice from the PI as to their interpretation, they don't have time to wait for you to go in 6 weeks to look at it. I mean, if it's that bad, the patient could die or could get very sick, right? So that's when they'll reach out to the site for those alert values. And then they usually want an answer within like that day. And the PI can say, yeah, this is clinically significant. We're gonna withdraw the subject. They're gonna come for early term visit. I'm gonna look to see if they need to be hospitalized or, you know, whatever, and that will be an SAE. Or they could say, no, this is not clinically significant. Patient will continue. But either way, the sponsor needs to know, and they're reducing their liability as a lab and as a sponsor with those results. But that's what you'll see on those panic or whatever it's called. It could be called different things. What was it called in this one?
The critical value alert.
You see? Yeah. So something like that, they will call or email or just be very persistent until they get an answer. Either from the coordinator, maybe the PI is not available, but the coordinator talked to the PI and the coordinator can tell whoever's asking, you know, what the action will be. Sometimes they insist to hear from the PI directly, either by email or by phone, so that they can document it. So in case something happens to the patient, it's not their fault. So that's what those are.
Okay.
And yeah, of course, as a CRA, you gotta follow up and see, okay, well, was this a AE? Is this a SAE? What's going on?
Okay, there was this one from the notes. They said the site coordinator didn't have access to EDC. How is that possible?
Could be possible. So if there's a new coordinator, let's say a coordinator, this is what happened there. A coordinator left the site, and then a new coordinator came in. And the old coordinator will lose their access to EDC, IWRS, maybe the IRB portal. Could be a number of different things. ECG portal, lab result portal, like all these things they could lose access to, right? Because they left. And the new one hasn't received access to or hasn't completed the training for all these things. Because you need to do trainings for these before you get access. So there could be a period where nobody has access except the PI. And the PI is never going to enter data. And they're not supposed to give their username and password to anyone else. So no one's doing it until this coordinator
is trained.
And that's why you always need backups for a site. It's not mandatory, but it's highly recommended that the site has backups and cross-trained coordinators, like Monica and Kobe. Each one is the primary coordinator of a different study, but they're both backups on the other study. So if one is sick or something happens or they're just not available, they both have access to all this stuff. And the PI, of course, but the PI is not going to enter data. You're lucky if they're looking at the study source.
Really?
In many cases, yeah. I mean, like for oncology and things that are like serious, you would at least hope they're more involved than they are. But you have some that don't do almost anything.
So how do they enroll subjects?
The coordinators, they just sign things, but they're not aware. They don't have what's called oversight. And that's why, again, you guys, CRAs, get paid so much. Is to sort of cover for them. Like, just let's make sure, especially this site doesn't have a great record of having good oversight, but they always enroll tons of patients, and we need that data. So you're gonna go out and monitor the site more frequently than you would your other
basically
site.
doing the doctor's job, the PI's job.
Pretty much. In some cases, not all the time. In some cases. Most of the time, no. Most of the time, the PI has adequate oversight, but they still, things can still fall through the cracks. And you guys are the last layer of defense before the FDA. I mean, if it wasn't CRA, it would be site collecting the data and then FDA auditing the data. Like, the CRA is crucial. It's all defense. If this was sports, you would be a defender. The site is the offense, and they should have some defense too, but sometimes they don't. And that's where you guys come in.
So you're defending the site and also the PI
And the sponsor.
and the sponsor.
Who are kind of
And the
allies. They're allies in this, in trying to get this data to the FDA. Clean data. Clean. So not that many deviations. That's pretty much it, like deviations. And then whether the drug is safe and effective is not, it's not in the site's hands. That's just science. But the way they collect the data is what's considered clean data.
Okay. I think those are basically my questions that I didn't understand.
Yeah? You got more? Keep them coming.
And
You asked Chris a lot of them
yeah, I
yesterday,
did.
right?
I did.
But it's different because the
Yeah,
stuff
it's
you talked
different.
about is like from the site perspective, and this is more
This
from
is more from the CRA perspective. What am I going to ask you? I have something to ask.
It's kind of hot in here.
It's just one. Okay. I didn't get to see the where the IPs are kept.
Oh, that's gonna be tomorrow, Monica.
Okay, that will be tomorrow.
Yeah, you guys are gonna do IP accountability tomorrow. It's just a room that's secure, double locked, with a cabinet. You're gonna make sure there's a temperature log, right? That's very important because remember the first interview question I asked you this morning when you picked your number was, what do you do if you notice that there's a leak, a water leak in the IP room, and there's mold? Like the first thing you should do is look to see whether the IP has been damaged at all. If yes, I mean you need to quarantine it. That's like a big issue. If not, okay, is the temperature still in order? Okay, good. So then you can continue.
Okay. Did you move here recently or?
Yeah, we moved here last year, like a year ago in March.
Because I saw that there was a change of address.
Yeah.
And,
That happens. And then that's a lot of extra work for the CRAs when there's a change of address. Because the IP has to get transported, you need a log for that. What's the site's SOP for transporting IP? How is the temperature maintained during the
transportation.
You need logs for all this, and then you need to collect all this stuff and make sure the site did it all according to the protocol and according to their own SOPs. It's a lot of extra work for you when the site moves. Not to mention the regulatory stuff. All the regulatory documents need to be updated.
Yeah, because you have to now put the new address. Do you have to send the new address to IRB?
A new CLIA waiver. You need updated CVs with the new address.
Okay.
Yeah. 1572.
57.
IRB change of address form. Maybe financial disclosures if they have the address on there. If they don't, it's okay. If they do, yeah. Some do, some don't. That's about it from regulatory, but still, that's enough. CLIA waiver is a big one. CLIA or CLIA waiver. The site, chances are, will not have that until they move. Yeah. And calibration logs too.
What is a calibration log?
It's like the way medical equipment Because medical equipment collects data, right? Like blood pressure monitor,
Oh, okay, those. Okay.
ECG machine. You know, they need to be calibrated by a professional.
Yep, I know
Once
that
a
now.
year.
Yeah.
Once a year.
Okay, that's clear. There's this one says the IP was not updated with the returned IP.
You see, that's what your colleague is gonna have to deal with, but it's not with pills. It's with a device. Yeah. That's gonna show. It should show in the master log, master IP log. Dispensed, not returned. How many dispensed? 30 pills dispensed, 0 returned. When it should have been 15 returned. Right? But it's if they didn't, if they lost it, it should be 0. Okay.
Okay, why do they have to give them more than the required IPs before the next visit?
In case they're late on their next visit. So protocols usually have a window in between visits of how much allotment, how many days allotment or weeks allotment you're allowed to be late for your scheduled visit. So if it's plus or minus 3 days and you're supposed to come in Thursday, you actually have until
Monday.
No, Friday, Thursday, Friday, till Sunday, which no clinic's gonna be open on Sunday, or minus 3 days, right? So they're given extra in case they're going the maximum allotment without running out.
Okay, so the IPs that are returned, are they destroyed or they are
They're not destroyed right away. No, they're kept in the used IP box, where they're not going to be mixed up with
the new ones?
With the ones that are not dispensed, and they're usually organized by subject. Like subject 1 usually will have like a Ziploc bag or something with their number with all their return bottles or blister packs or whatever it is, or devices, right? And then there's the new undispensed meds, which are not yet assigned to any subject, right? The IWRS assigns that at each visit. So you don't know, you'll see unused IP in the cabinet, you don't know which subjects those are going to be for yet. Might not be for anyone. It depends on the IWRS and who they assign it to at the visits. But the used and the returned should be put in there per subject, should be on the master log and on the individual subject log for accountability and compliance. It's a lot of stuff, and that's tedious too. And CRAs sometimes they don't have time to do the IP accountability at every visit, just because there's so much data they have to review, or maybe the site moved and there was a lot of new regulatory stuff they had to follow up on, and there's only so many hours in that day. They leave it for the next visit, and then the same thing happens at the next visit, so they leave it till the next. Pretty soon, you have a closeout visit, where it's the last monitoring visit, it's the closeout visit, and you have pretty much IP accountability since the beginning of the study or whenever it was last done, which I've seen happen so many times at our sites with monitors here on closeout visits. Just all they do is IP accountability, but in reality it should have been done every visit.
Okay, I want to ask this question. The IWF thing?
What's that?
Let me see.
IWRS?
IWRS.
Interactive Web Response System.
Okay. Is there
or interactive voice response system.
Okay. Because that's the one that dispenses the medication.
Yeah.
Okay, do you have an actual document like this where you have to come and then write it in? Like to be the source?
It should be on the source.
It should be on the source document.
Not only that, it should be on the site source where they'll write it, but it also, in the system, it will generate a paper, like a report, and you print, and you put that in the source as well.
Okay.
So you have that printout from the IWRS itself, and then you have the coordinator writing it in, usually the bottle number, and then the coordinator is supposed to go to the cabinet and find that number and assign that.
And then file the printout in.
Yes.
what binder?
and the source.
In the source binder.
Yeah. And then you as a CRA are making sure that those numbers are the same and that the bottle is the same. So you're confirming three things. The IWRS printout, what's written in the source, more than three things. What's written on the bottle itself, what's written in the master log, what's written in the subject log for the IP, and finally in the EDC if it goes there. So you're confirming like all of that for every visit. Don't get overwhelmed.
It's a lot.
I know, it's a lot. It is a lot. Like CRAs work hard. People, I make fun of them like for being lazy and that, but you know, most of them are like hard workers and they just get burnt out. It's not about really being lazy. You have some that are truly lazy, but most are not that way. Most mistakes by monitors happen because they're overworked. And then the next day you gotta go to another site and do it again.
Yeah, the same thing over and over again.
But once you start doing it over and over and over, you get better. You know, you get better, more experience. You've seen more things. You start seeing more things. It's like driving a car. You know, when you're first starting out, you haven't been in any situations where you don't know anything. Once you've been driving for 20,000 miles.
When I picked up my car and drove first time on this California highway, I almost lost my mind. I was overwhelmed.
It's way worse in Boston, though.
With too many lanes.
Yeah, it's kind of confusing.
Okay, so what is the emergency code break envelopes?
Very good. So, remember, studies are usually blinded, right? Double blind. So the PI won't know what the subject's receiving. The patient won't know. And of course, the CRAs won't know either, right? Only the sponsor know based on the code. That code, like when the IWRS issues the number, that code corresponds to either the IP or the placebo or the standard of treatment, current standard of treatment. Right? Like when a subject's randomized, okay, they could be randomized to either the IP, a placebo, or maybe a current standard of treatment. Subject's not going to know which one they're getting, neither will the PI, neither will the CRA. The only thing that knows is that number, that code. Alright, that code, and that subject, when he comes at every visit, every subsequent visit, will still be assigned the same thing. Right? So if they're assigned to IP, in most cases they're going to continue to get the IP. There's some studies where they can change it, but in most studies that's not the case. They will get the IP throughout. The PI is allowed to increase the dose, but if it's placebo, it's not going to do anything. Right? But they can still increase the dose or decrease it for some studies. So breaking the blind is if an SAE occurred and the patient ends up in the ER right there, and the doctor there has nothing to do with research, but wants to know what the patient took. They need to call the site, and then the PI, there's an envelope in the site that's sealed, and the PI can break that code and find out what that subject is taking. Right. But once that's done, usually the patient's not allowed to continue because you break the blind. Yeah. Because now the PI and the patient know what it is. You know, so it could technically influence their...
Okay, what if it's the IP under investigation, if it's not a placebo or a drug that's already in the market?
Well, if you break the blind, it's usually
It's
over
over.
for... Yeah, the patient can continue. Unless you get a waiver. Maybe in cancer studies you can, but... Cancer studies are blinded too, but it's never a placebo in cancer. It's either the IP or the current standard of treatment. It's unethical to do placebo on cancer patients. But in some countries, they get away with it for a long time.
Country? Really?
Yep. Some very shady things happened. Like India, Africa happened a lot, actually.
Yeah, Africa will be... That's what... When you were saying you wanted to go to Nigeria to...
Well, they're all cleaned up now. Like in the 90s? Yeah.
Okay. I didn't get to see all of those, but it's okay. Does the site have an adequate? Of course, there will always be adequate supply of IPs.
How do you know?
You have to look at the check the log,
Yeah.
and then you, I would say, have an actual look at where it's been stored.
Yeah, like count them. How many?
Yeah, how many do
How
you
many
have?
undispensed do you have?
Mm-hmm.
Don't rely on the vendors to do their job, right? Usually, what sends IP to the site is a vendor, and it's an automated system, so they know. Okay, when something's been dispensed, now they're gonna send more automatically. Sometimes the site has to order more manually. That's obviously a situation where more mistakes will happen,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then you as a CRA are checking either automatic or manual system to see is it actually being done properly? Or if it's manual, are they actually requesting more IP? Same with lab kits. Very common with lab kits. Lab kits, just like IP, expire.
Mm.
Okay? If the site runs out of lab kits, they can't use the expired ones.
They can?
Cannot.
Cannot.
That's a deviation.
Mm.
The results are not going to be valid because it's an expired lab kit. So a lot of times you will see the site or the CRA will just take a quick glance. They'll see a bunch of lab kits and they'll say, oh yeah, this is fine. This is more than enough. But if you look closely, you see expiration dates and maybe they're expiring soon.
Mm.
Maybe they're expiring before your next visit. Right? So you need to make sure at least
Okay,
put
if
in
it's
your report.
expiring before next visit, will you suggest that they take it out before you come, or
No, I would suggest they order more.
they order more?
Yeah.
And then leave those in there, or pull them
Leave
out?
them in because they're not expired yet,
Okay.
right? They could still use them. But I would, if I were a CRA, I'd put it in my report. I know that CRA observed several lab kits were expiring on February 2nd. As of this IMV on January 24th, there are 3 screening kits left with all set to expire February 2nd. CRA recommended site order more when needed. That's it. If you do that, you're covered.
Mm.
Doesn't mean the site will do it, but at least you documented that you've done it, and it could be in your follow-up letter
Follow-up
too.
letter.
Still doesn't mean the site will do it.
Mm.
You may still get an inexperienced coordinator, and you may have to call them to prevent your future headaches. Say, did you order more lab kits? No? What do you do? Why? Go do it. Or yes? Okay, thank you. Now you're preventing your future headaches at your next visit. If you can remember. If you have that luxury.
Of remembering. Then you have the action notify or
You have action items.
action items.
You won't do a notifile as a CRA. It's,
Okay.
the sites do
Yeah,
notifile.
the notify. Okay.
You might do a notifile internally, like for a trial master file system, but it's not for the site. It's not a notifile for the site.
So all shipments should be recorded on file.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
What file? Source document.
In the reg binder.
Red binder.
For IP,
For IP, yeah.
as soon as the new shipment comes in, the site needs to actually log that batch into the IWRS. Okay, so if the site receives a new box of IP today, there will be either a USB or like a paper in it. The site signs and faxes it back or emails it back to the vendor that they've received it. And then they go on the IWRS and they log it in. They log in a code. And then that will tell the system that the site has those drugs now. And then the IWRS can dispense those. And of course, as CRA, you gotta make sure all this is happening.
Okay.
Otherwise, if the site receives it and stores it, but they don't do this part with the IWRS, then when they need to assign medication to a subject, the system won't have any meds to
dispense.
dispense, even though it's there,
Mm.
but the system doesn't see it as registered yet. So then I've happened before where I told them, hey, did you log it in? And they're like, oh no. Well, That's why it's not dispensing it. So you need to log it in, and then it will
Dispense.
try within 5 minutes after.
Okay.
Lots, but it's good. You're asking good questions. Those are good.
Am I?
I think you have a good chance to be CRA right away.
Wee.
Why not?
Okay. Thank you.
Skill-wise, yes. Knowledge-wise, yes.
Wait. You're giving me too much credit. Okay.
Well, I don't know how you'll do in the job, but you can get the job.
Okay.
Then you'll be very stressed out when you get
I'll
it.
be so stressed out.
You'll be like your friend.
Oh my goodness, I'm stressed. Those documentations adequate?
But this is the good like first step towards your career is this like learning these things. Especially when you combine it with your background, because you have a good background in medical and then CNS stuff. That's huge. You're familiar with all the medications, you're familiar with the diagnosis.
Well, I try, because you can't be giving meds, before you give meds to anyone, you have to go into their binder to read their medical history,
Yeah,
to read why they are taking what they are taking,
you see?
you know, so you have to know all of those.
It's the
before.
same thing. You have to know their medical history.
Medical
right?
history, yeah.
Because you don't want to give someone Zyprexa if they have a risk of diabetes, right? Yeah.
And then when dispensing the drugs, you check and check and check and check before you actually give the medication to
Yeah.
the individual.
Same concept as a
So,
CRA.
Yeah.
And as a coordinator too.